Welcome everybody to our latest episode as SaaSy AF, where we try to break down everything from tech to the world of politics and the impact that that has on the world of tech. We're very grateful and honoured to be joined by a person that needs no introduction, Emily Maitlis, who has a studied career from working in the BBC to leaving in around 2019 after an iconic, I think the interview that was heard around the world with Prince Andrew during her time at Newsnight, and is now the co-founder and co-host of the News Agents, one of the, personally, I will say, one of my favourite podcasts to listen to get up to date on current events and everything in between. So Emily, welcome to SaaSy AF. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So Emily, what I really want to jump into is getting your feeling of truth, trust, and the media battleground that now exists in 2025 and has existed since people were able to afford these things and cameras, and people like myself were able to start having opinions and put it on video. I'd love to get your opinion on how things have changed from your time in the BBC to the evolution of quote unquote new media or independent media, and how you have managed to build. Obviously you guys have, you yourself and the team of the News Agents have a name behind you, which obviously I assume helps, but there's so much competition for you guys within the marketplace. How do you guys navigate the BS, shall we say, as opposed to bringing real impartiality, not impartiality, facts-based approach to what you guys put out into the ether?
I think one of the things that we do differently is that we literally come to the editorial morning meeting every day with just the stuff that we want to talk about. And it sounds really obvious when I say that out loud, but we'd all worked in newsrooms where there was a kind of obligation to do a certain type of news or a certain type of story, or, you know, oh, it's the 70th anniversary of the UN, we ought to cover this, or we have to cover this, or, oh, it'd be wrong to miss out on this. And it's a very different thing when you are talking so directly to your audience, because frankly, our audience tells us by the numbers that we get what they're interested in and what they're not. And that is a whole new challenge for us in a way, because sometimes we think, you know, I don't know whether people are going to like this, but we think it's important, so we're going to have to do it. And sometimes we think, oh, actually, I know the audience is going to love this and we love this too, so we're going to tell you the story that we want to talk about today. And I guess, you know, if you ask me, how much of myself, how much is personal in what I bring to the podcast now, I kind of have to say 100%.
Yeah.
We don't do stories that we find boring. We don't do stories that we're not interested in. And obviously that creates, you know, in a way its own dilemma. You know, are there stories that we're missing? Are there stories that we should be doing more on? But we get this absolutely kind of tight relationship now between our audience. It literally, I can see every single day how many people download, how long they listen for, how many people watch on YouTube as opposed to, you know, listen on their phones, all the rest of it. And so there is something, I mean, I think this is part of the whole conversation about new media. The metrics stare you in the face now. And so the question you're having is, do we do stuff for our audience? Do we do stuff because it is news? Do we do stuff because we're interested in it? And I think we are trying to find our sort of route through that, you know, in all honesty. Sometimes it's not clear to us, but the days of kind of top-down news have gone, you know, and I speak as somebody who, when I joined the BBC 20 years ago, there was like the meme was about news readers shuffling their papers at the end of the bulletin. You know, there was this moment where everyone go, and thank you, and have a very good evening. And the camera would still be on you, and you couldn't do anything embarrassing. And so everyone used to shuffle their papers. And it became a sign of, I mean, I don't want to labour this, but it became a sign of like, you know, the newsreader's the authority and you, the audience, are now allowed to go, right? Because that was the sort of dynamic. We have something to impart to you and you must listen, you know, like we were preaching to a congregation. And that was, you know, that's a long time ago now. That's kind of 20 years ago. That's out of date. And what started to happen with the advent of Twitter and with the advent of social media was we used to talk about user generated content, right?
Yep.
So in the olden days, let's say, you know, 4 decades ago, you would go to somewhere far away, a war zone, and you'd report back. And it was only you that knew what was happening, right? You would be in, you know, Somalia, you'd be in Libya, you'd be the one that said, I'm going to tell you what's happening on the ground here, right? And until you get my bulletin at 9 p.m., you won't know what's happening. And then, of course, with social media, that started to change. And it's like, oh, I've just thought we could use people who are there, right? We can actually use voice on the ground. If there's an explosion, who do we turn to? We want the people who are absolutely on the spot, the eyewitnesses, the people who saw what happened. And this was when I think Twitter was at its most sort of generative and exciting in a way. It was like you suddenly realized that the whole world could have its eyeballs on something and that could inform how you told a story. And that was really incredible. What we're seeing now is the way that these things can be used as a force for good and they can be used as a source for massive disinformation. So you might get a pile on something that is absolutely untrue, but if enough people are retweeting it and amplifying it, you will come away with a totally different concept of, you know, what actually happened. And if I want to go, you know, to the scene of an explosion and say, oh, actually, it was those protesters that caused that, if I can generate enough misinformation, that's what happens. And so I think what I'm trying to explain, I guess, is the difference in the relationship between what used to be the broadcaster and the audience. And now it's much more horizontal. There is no vertical strategy left. We are horizontal and we take from our audience, we learn from our audience, they give us feedback, they tell us what they like. And I think that you know, that is a change, that there's a change now for good.
You find then, just with having said that, that there is an obligation on the likes of yourselves and the news agents to really try and combat that misinformation that there is out there. Like, that's a massive weight to have on your shoulders, from just an information perspective, and trying to wade through the noise that is disinformation. That's only going to get worse through AI, deepfakes, and the likes of that. That must take a massive toll.
Of course.
I hope I haven't actually just brought that to your attention and put that massive toll on your shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, I think we are, we remain big believers in experts and expertise, you know, and I kind of can't believe in 2025 I'm sort of saying that out loud like it's a dirty secret.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, that moment, I sort of think back to that moment during the Brexit campaign in 2016 with Michael Gove saying we've had enough of experts, and how much was unleashed by that one comment. And all I would say is we remain buyers of expertise. You know, I don't know enough about wealth tax or the pensions market or what's happening on the ground in Moscow or how to tell the story from inside Israel of what's happening, you know, within the kind of Israeli population and their perception of their own government. Or I wish we could get further into Gaza. We can't. But I'm a big buyer of, if somebody knows something better and you trust that source, you go to that source.
Yeah.
And that's something that has been, I think, fundamental for us on the news agents, that we chat and we love the chat and we do, and we sort of talk round an idea and we sort of throw it back and forth, and that's all, you know, it's good exercise and it's great. But if we actually want to find something out, we go to the experts, you know. And I love, I remember thinking, because it was a bit of a kind of dive into a deep pond off quite a high board when we left the BBC and we didn't know what would come next.
I can imagine.
I mean, it was kind of crazy, you know, now I think about it. But I don't think I realised at the time, like, what risk of failure could look or or feel like, But as soon as we started, and I remember doing this thing where I felt I had to explain to everyone, like, we are this, and I used to do this, and now we set up this. And then but you know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah,
sort of think you're
setting
starting,
the groundwork.
set the groundwork, start from square one. And then in the first month, I remember, we were getting Tony Blair and Gary Lineker and Piers Morgan, and, we were getting, I mean, I'm trying to think who we got in that first, like, 3 weeks or so, but they were, whether it was kind of from the world of journalism, from the world of sport, from the world of politics, we were getting people on the show. And as soon as we were getting them on the show, I kind of thought, okay, like, deep breath. If those people are coming to us, they can help us tell the story, right? And I don't mean, I don't mean of one political persuasion at all. I mean experts in their own field, whatever that field was. And I remember thinking, this is going to work, because it's not just us. Much as I love talking to John and Lewis, like, it's not just, it's like, guys, all right, enough. It's somebody coming on, and it's like, it's somebody who just knows stuff. And so I suppose, how do you counter misinformation? I mean, at its most basic, you make sure that you are using valuable source of information. And I'd be the first to say, I go to the FT for my numbers. I go to the Economist to try and, understand the sort of context or the political trends. And yeah, and I read a lot around my subjects. And yeah, I mean, it sounds old fashioned, doesn't it, to say that you believe in experts and expertise, but I do.
It's unbelievable that as you say, in 2025, that it's a sentence that has to be uttered. Personally, as with my companies, I have a tendency to focus on, look, I don't know everything. I don't want to know everything. If anything, I know nothing. And there's a reason why I want to have a team around me of people that are eminently more capable and
100%.
more intelligent than I am,
100%.
and sort of just be the face to help guide them through that.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, that's true for our team as well. We've got this fantastic team, many of whom are, in their 20s. We've got a really good range of sort of generations, if you like. And we've got, I'd be the first to say, we've got people who will be pulling me into stories that I wouldn't have otherwise seen, showing me memes I wouldn't have otherwise seen, getting my focus on things that is a big story somewhere else that I'm missing, and then we sort of fill in for them. We're like, it's so weird. We were covering the 7/7 anniversary, the bombings of London, on the show yesterday. And it was really interesting seeing our young team, because they, like, some of them, were like sort of 7 or 8 when it happened, and for them it was kind of like, the 9/11, or the thing that you'd heard about but you'd never seen. And John said to me, where were you? And I was like, I'd literally been covering the Olympics announcement in Stratford in the East End the night before. I said, where were you? He's like, I was literally in Paris waiting for the Olympic announcement in Paris. And then he went to Glen Eagles. And so, we bring that sense of like, yeah, we've been at this a long time. I can tell you exactly where I was when it happened. I can tell you exactly what the feeling was on the ground when it happened. I can remember the speech Ken Livingstone made. I remember the backlash against Blair. We can fill in all the stuff that is like, yeah, we've been at this for a while now. We'll bring our memories, we'll bring our experience. And I hope that matches up somewhere.
No, it certainly does. And as I said before we started talking, that I am a big fan of the news agents, and that definitely comes across. So I now have an insight into how you guys are talking about things that I wouldn't typically hear or think that you guys would be covering. Although Lewis kind of falls into my age range, so I think that he probably helps there too. So that kind of touches a bit on the echo chamber that most people are in today. Like, I'm an advocate, not sponsored, not affiliated at all with them, and I'm unsure whether you are or not, or whether the news agents are or not, but Ground News is one of my favorite, most used apps on my phone, because what I hate is the idea of my other half will come into the room and I'll be listening to somebody that's on the completely different side of what we would consider our side of the political spectrum. And the reason, and they will get annoyed at it, but the reason that I'm listening to it is because I want to know the argument on the other side. I want to know what framing the other side is taking so that I can challenge that myself. And I'm not just exposed to things that I agree with constantly. I'm exposed to different points of views and different opinions, so that you can really form a fundamental, wide-ranging response to this is my opinion on this and this is why. And I think that is the downfall to the misinformation side of things, is these algorithms are just reinforcing our behavior in terms of the media that we consume.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I think from the beginning we have made sure that we have a plurality of guests, and I think that challenge is critical, and I mean, we covered the Republican convention and the Democrat convention, last year in the US in the run up to the campaign. I weirdly have formulated over the years quite a strong relationship with Steve Bannon, who, is kind of like, to a lot of our listeners. And we get a lot of pushback, and a lot of people say, why are you, platforming, that whole platforming question. I mean, it's a really complicated question that I never stop thinking about. But I think if you're not having those voices in your head, you don't understand where they're coming from. And that can tell you a lot more than a circular conversation, which just, has people saying, you're so right, you're so right.
Yeah, and there's that analogy that the sunlight is the best disinfectant. Actually, having conversations with people, like, obviously there's a line where we all don't cross with regards to that. To me, I think that it's a quite obvious one, but people with different perspectives, why not have a conversation? Like, what badness could there be out of coming from, especially with the likes of somebody with your credentials that will challenge somebody whenever you have a different opinion or a different thought or a different perspective?
Do you know what? On that note, I'm going to slightly agree and slightly disagree.
Okay.
In the best sort of phrase. I don't know. I mean, I love the phrase that sunlight is the best disinfectant. I'm not sure it is anymore. I mean,
fair enough.
Genuinely, I think that a lot of things see the light of day now, and people don't know how to respond. So, I mean, there will be a lot of people that think that, for example, Steve Bannon espouses a hard right, racist ideology. He aligns himself with Marine Le Pen. He aligns himself with a lot of the parts of the far right. And yet he stood at a rally, a few years ago and said, if they call you a racist, wear it as a badge of honor. Now, in that one phrase, you have the whole question of sunlight, and the disinfectant. And it's really complicated. The one thing I wouldn't do for a moment, to your listeners, your viewers, is pretend I have all the answers, because I literally go into work and I bang my head on the desk, it kind of like, have I got this entirely wrong? Are we getting this right? Are we, so yeah, you're right. We interviewed Steve Bannon a few weeks ago, and I said, I just want to try and understand. I want to try and understand how he's explaining the LA raids, the ICE raids, the immigrant, the migrant worker roundup, and the immigration crackdown, which has gone so badly wrong in many places, and yet seems to have landed Trump a better kind of, poll rating on immigration than anything else. And I keep thinking back to that interview and thinking, well, did we under-challenge him? Like, did we not challenge him enough? And then you're kind of caught with this whole question of like, well, if you push back, you get pushed back into this position of being like, oh, you see, you don't care about immigration and you don't take working people seriously. And why would anyone listen to you? Because you don't understand what it's like, if Mexican immigrants are taking your jobs. And so I think I go in this spiral of thinking, is my job to just listen? Is my job to push back? Is my job to say, oh, hang on, you hard right racist, right? And to be fair, I think depending on the context, depending on the argument, depending on who's there, you sort of, you try a mixture of all of them. I mean, there are some people who I think are better at handling the media, and I think, I have to be wily with you. I have to be really careful. I have to be because what do they get? They get like a free platform. I don't know if you've come across Gavin Newsom's new, right? So he's doing this whole podcast now, and he's very much in the sort of space of like, we can disagree agreeably, we can listen, we can blah, blah, blah. And actually, he doesn't challenge people at all. And I'm thinking, what's your game here, buddy? Because if you're not going to challenge people when they are wrong, spreading disinformation, telling you stats that they've just made up, like, if you're not challenging them, that is a free hit. And that doesn't make anyone look good. So, yeah, I mean, I never stop asking myself what the right balance is between, as it were, the sunshine and the and the disinfectant.
I don't envy your role or your job in that in any way, shape, or form. And it's just going back to just talking about our friends on the other side of the pond. Like the Michael Gove analogy earlier. Similarly, we had Kellyanne Conway saying about alternative facts, which again is the example of, what are we descending into where everybody can have their own fact that exists, and trying to wade through that is just a bit of a noise. And on that point then, because we've got the most recent example is Mr. Musk getting involved in the presidency, and now the bust up there. With these tech oligarchs that we do have, they obviously are now seen as political actors. How do you see that as it ultimately evolves into? Because we've had the blowback now between sort of the fallout between Trump and Elon 2.0, like the second time that they've fallen out again. The Elon saying that he's going to start a new American party. The rebellion within his own board at Tesla, looking to sort of think, well, are you spending time on Tesla here? Like, we've got stuff that we need to be focused on. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on. I don't think there's any going back, the fact that they are political actors, but how can that be mitigated to the point where this power imbalance of the people versus just capital and money, especially whenever you've got somebody like Musk, who controls not just capital, but also a media ecosystem that can control algorithms and ultimately spread either information or misinformation depending on how he's feeling on that day.
Look, one of the big, genuinely, one of the biggest questions of our time now, I think, is which is more powerful? Is it executive office or is it money? Right? I mean, if you balance, we're going to see that. We're going to actually see it played out in real time, because Musk is the richest man and Trump is the most powerful man in terms of the office he holds. And Musk has said he's going to, primary senators that voted in favor of the bill that he hates. And actually, it's really funny watching critics of the bill now. Democrats are kind of like, yay, go Musk. Yeah, tell them what a terrible bill it is. But wait, we hate Musk. But we love Teslas. So, everyone's screwed on this one, right? I want to drive your car. I love your car, but I hate you. But I also agree with you on this thing. It is a mess, really. I haven't interviewed Musk yet, she says, but I did interview Mark Zuckerberg a few years back. I mean, this was kind of, when Facebook was still seen as this like thing of beauty and goodness. And what I remember at the time, and this sounds really weird, but I remember thinking, oh God, I'm sounding a bit cynical here, because he's just going on about Facebook being like, oh, you can go for a run with your friends and you can share recipes with your friends and you can share cute pictures of your pets. And I was like, oh, hang on a sec. Like, this is a bigger deal than that, isn't it? And he was kind of majestically apolitical at that time. And I remember thinking, how do you not, like, genuinely, how do you not get how complicated this is? And he just kind of kept on going, we're a platform, we're not a publisher, we don't have a view, we don't have a this. You cannot not have a view, because, as we now know, the Rohingya massacre sort of was was worsened so much more by failures of social media companies to step in and stop, kind of mob reaction and misinformation and disinformation. You cannot not have a view when you have that much power. And it's a really complicated question. But, when during the Biden years, when Zuckerberg, I think, said, oh, he kind of got his act together and said, we're going to have to put things in place and we're going to have to, put moderators in place. I don't think that was Zuckerberg being a Democrat. I think it was Zuckerberg kind of going, I want to do whatever's good for my business, right? And then Trump comes in and he's like, oh, great, we can get rid of that. I want to do whatever's good for my business. And actually, we are in a place now where, if you have enough wealth, you can buy Venice for your wedding and come back and find, whilst you were partying in Venice, you've got even more tax breaks because Trump's big, beautiful bill has just probably paid for your £50 million wedding, in about 5 minutes, right? So we are, unprecedented is overused, but I don't think we've kind of understood the dynamic yet between who ultimately has the power. Are the big, it used to be big donors. It sounds so sort of sweet now to think back to the days when, it was the donors that were controlling politics, because they gave, they gave $5 million or whatever. It's like, oh mate, move over. Now we've got megabucks, and not only are they giving to the campaign, but they are probably running the campaign. They are probably redirecting the campaign. And Elon Musk is out of government for now, but frankly, who knows? Is he controlling who stands in the midterms? I don't know. Does he have that political power? I don't know. Does he have that money? He does. So, we're going to be seeing where the power plays out.
I think it's kind of exemplified with that photo of Trump's second inauguration with the tech, all of the tech guys standing in front of the members of the Supreme Court, and like the ridiculousness in that. And actually, whenever we had Alistair Campbell over at Dublin Tech Summit, he was kind enough to come across and sit down with us for a fireside chat, and I realized that for a time that Alistair had made the point that Mr. Zuckerberg was genuinely thought that he was going to end up in jail if Trump got reelected, and wanted to sort of ensure that he was, on the right side should that have happened, because he didn't think that the same thing would happen if Kamala was in, because some people follow checks and rules more closely than others, shall we say. And I retorted to, I don't think that Mr. Zuckerberg would do well in jail, no matter how much UFC he does. And to this, I then realized that we were at a tech summit, and there was likely somebody working in Meta. So I asked the audience if there was somebody from Meta here. And of course, one hand went up, and I had to go with my tail between my legs at the end of it and say, please don't tell your boss that I said that. So, Emily, I've got two final questions that I have for you before we finish up. The first one is, we're constantly bombarded with negativity. Like we could open up Twitter now, and both of us could find two versions of like negative news stories, bombings, killings, shootings, earthquakes, the Texas floods. We could see any of that. Give me one thing that gives you hope and keeps you positive on the day to day, or one thing that you see as something to be hopeful for in the future.
That's a really long pause. I'm actually naturally optimistic. I actually think the next generation have got a really good handle on the things that we got wrong, and that makes me feel excited, and I kind of hear the conversations, whether it's in the office or whether it's kind of, my kids and their friends, or whether it's just sort of being around, the sort of the Gen Zers, the next people. And I just think, you've kind of worked this stuff out. It's going to be really hard, but I sort of, yeah, I remain quite impressed actually.
There's that, the American experiment is always used as an example, but if you think of the human experiment, it's all trial and error. Like we're all trialing and failing, and then we end up in a better place. Hopefully, that continues on the trajectory. Like despite all of the negativity we hear, this is still the best time to be alive on this planet. And here's hoping that outside of some madman with a big red button on his desk changing that for us all.
And I think actually, it doesn't. The things that don't get amplified are the minuscule and multiple random acts of kindness. And actually, you just see that every single day. I mean, sometimes you have to stop looking at the big picture and look at the little picture. The sweet gestures and the kindnesses and the kind of tender words, and you just think, yeah, we get this as a race. We get this.
I love that. And my final question is, any book that you would recommend to anybody in today's world for the year 2025?
Okay, I'm going to give you a book that I loved. I couldn't put down. It's a novel. It's Wellness by Nathan Hill. It's very funny. It's very good. It is about it's about so much. It's about the algorithm of social media, with the power of the placebo, with the kind of hope of starting a new life and leaving an old one behind. And it's beautifully written, and it's fabulous.
Fantastic. Well, there you have it, folks. Emily, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Everybody that's listening, watching, or wherever you're consuming your podcast, go listen, subscribe to the news agents. If you want great analysis on global events or just general what's going on in the world, because as I said at the start, I personally use it as one of my main sources of news and analysis, and one of my first stops for whenever I want to get a grasp on the where the intelligent people are putting their money with regards to their thoughts. And as you've heard Emily say, she's building that on top of even the people inside her team and the team around her. So definitely go and subscribe to the news agents. And thank you, Emily, for chatting with me and putting up with my Irish brogue for the past 30 minutes.
And it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Perfect.
It's been
Thanks so much.
talking.